everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. As you know, my name is Jules. I am a rising second year here at MIT Sloan. Just a little bit about myself. Pre-Sloan, I worked in the tech industry for about 6 years. And then my summer internship that I just finished up last Friday was as a product manager on the Adobe Risk Platform team at Adobe. I'm really excited to be here today to kind of introduce our panelists. And we have three panelists here tonight, Dragana, Andres, and Janisha. So I will allow them to introduce themselves as they please.
Great. I guess we can start with me. Thank you, Jules. So my name is Dragana. Hi, everyone. Really nice to meet you and to see so many people. I'm an MBA 2023 grad. So I graduated in 2023, which is basically the last generation of large language models in the education generation. So jokes aside, yeah, that's me. I'm originally from Bosnia. And after my MBA graduation, I joined Amazon as a senior technical product manager. I work on the Kindle team or Kindle Direct Publishing team, more specifically. Yeah, that's about me. Currently live in Seattle. So yeah.
Cool. So I guess my turn. My name is Andres Romero Pompa. I MBA 2024, so graduated last May. Just crazy to think about that a whole year just flew by. And I'm currently working as a development manager at Links Ventures in Richmond, Virginia. I have a background as an architectural designer, so I did that in Mexico for 2 years, doing some ground up developments, industrial and multifamily stuff, and then worked in New York as a designer for about 3 years before starting at Sloan in 22.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janisha Cole. I graduated from the Sloan Fellows program in 2023. I'm originally from Singapore, and before Sloan, I spent about 10 years in the health tech industry. My background is in engineering, so I did the gamut of things, from product development all the way to commercialization of new devices. And right after Sloan, I kind of switched my role into a more commercial role, leading market expansion in the US. And more recently, I've joined the life insurance industry as a program manager, leading digital transformation in marketing analytics. Yeah, so very excited to be here today. Thank you all.
Thank you to our panelists for introducing themselves. So we'll just jump right in and get started with some high-level questions first. And these questions will just be open to all panelists, or all of the questions will be open to all panelists, and they can choose to decide if they want to share. So we'll kind of start off a little bit easy and ask our panelists, why did they choose MIT Sloan?
I can start with this one. It's funny because I think coming from an architecture background, it's kind of like a non-traditional background to come into an MBA. And I was talking to people at my previous job, and somebody recommended MIT as a place that is kind of like very innovative and diverse, and just because of the amount of different programs and also how it is housed in the larger MIT campus. And that's kind of when I started engaging with the program and talking to some people. So that's kind of like what ultimately ended up driving my decision to come to Sloan, that met so many people from different backgrounds. It's a very welcoming atmosphere. And I think the work that I was doing kind of was leaning on a lot of the innovation work. And I found that very interesting from the beginning at Sloan, just being at the cutting edge of technology and seeing that kind of happen all around me.
Thank you so much, Andres. Does anybody else want to kind of share their experience on why Sloan?
I'm happy to share a little bit as well. I think there's some similarities with Andres on this for me. So my background is, prior to Sloan, I was working in Kenya, leading like a software sort of like platform development for like a distributed forestry company. So I was already in kind of like tech and product management and startup world. And I was kind of like self-taught on all of those things. And what I wanted out of a business school, I think, or like a strong community at the intersection of sort of like technology, both like in the MBA program and also like outside, obviously, which MIT is essentially that, and then like a strong entrepreneurship ecosystem and entrepreneurship resources, and then that component of innovation as well that Andres was mentioning. So that was the big reason why I initially wanted to join MIT Sloan, and then after I got accepted and started talking to students, I just really thought that Sloanies were like really just really friendly, collaborative group of people. Everyone I met was like so nice to me and wanted to engage. And so that definitely also helped make that choice or solidify that choice.
Yeah. So for me, I have a slightly different perspective. So by the time I decided that I wanted to do my MBA, I've already had almost a decade of work experience in my pocket. So the thought about doing a 2-year MBA program was a little intimidating, given my experience and also my age. So I was just looking at programs out there that really could fit my needs in terms of what I want to get out of MBA program, which is to level up my business skills, grow my career in the health tech sector. And as I was looking around, I wanted something that is globally recognized and also yet provided that immersive MBA experience that a regular MBA student would go through. So Sloan really fit that bucket with the Sloan Fellows program, and I'm happy to chat more about that as well. It's the perfect balance between an executive MBA program and a regular MBA for those with like 10 to 15 years of experience, just like what Terrell has mentioned. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, everyone. The next question we'll have here is kind of diving into how were you involved in the Sloan community while you're at MIT?
I think like the first club that I joined at Sloan, not that community is necessarily only that, but that was kind of like the first thing was the first generation low income club. And there was kind of I'm also like a first generation college graduate. So that was kind of like a community that first really welcomed me and helped me kind of like figure out, okay, so here's how everything works, how business school works, how you pick your classes, which ones are good ones, how do you look for internships. So like just a lot of that support and also kind of just a general social support. So that was the first kind of community that I joined. There's many others. And I think following that first semester, I then joined the leadership of the first gen low income club at Sloan. So I was like co-president with some of my colleagues and good friends. That was one, and also because I lived in Kenya for 6 years prior to Sloan, I also joined the Africa Business Club, and I was really excited just about like all of the kind of students who were in that club and all of the experiences they were bringing from the continent, from all over many different countries, and organizing also the Africa Innovate Conference, which is just like a huge, really like great event that brings like so many kind of like innovators, entrepreneurs, really great people from the continent. So it was just really fun to help like organize that and be part of it. Those were just like two kind of highlights. There's many others, but yeah, I'll let someone else chime in as
well. Yeah, so for myself, there like what Dragana has mentioned, there are so many clubs you can choose from. It's very diverse, and there are clubs that cater to different interests. So for me, myself, coming from a health tech background, I also did immerse myself more in the healthcare club, as well as joining a hackathon called MIT Hacking Medicine as a committee member. So that's how I got to immerse myself more with the networks that are within MIT itself. And at the same time, there were also class level communities. So there was a cultural club within my program itself, where we actually had a cultural night to expose classmates to different cuisines and traditions from their home country. So that was a really enjoyable experience for me. Yeah.
For me, I think as Dragana and Janisa mentioned already, that there's so many clubs, there's so many groups, and I was one of those that signed up to a lot of them first semester, and kind of started getting more and more involved in some of them as the time went by. But so I kind of like was more active on the Latin American Business Club, the Hispanic Business Club, and the Real Estate Club. They the Real Estate Club primarily because that's where my career interests were, and given my background in architecture, is also kind of it's an interesting club that it kind of like lives within two different programs. It lives under Sloan, but there's also a lot of people that you meet from outside, across the school, outside of the Sloan group, and I got to meet a lot of cool Sloanies through that too, and got really close. And also Latin American Business Club and Hispanic Business Club. I think that's where I met a lot of friends that I still keep in touch with, and also all the events that they plan kind of become like a really really great way to kind of build community. And as Dragana mentioned, it's kind of like one of the most it's a really welcoming community that I think helped me pretty much through all anything that I would run into, any issues with recruiting or any issues with classwork or just like personal stuff. So I think those two affinity clubs became really important to me. And I think the ocean structure of the MBA program was also very helpful. I think it was like a great way to kind of start meeting a lot of people and like helping organize some of those community events and those like Christmas social gatherings and that kind of stuff was like, I think, a great part of my experience that I really enjoyed helping out with.
Thanks, everyone. Andres, I wanted to kind of tap in what you said just to share with our prospective students what oceans are. Could you give just a high-level overview of what an ocean is?
Yeah, of course. So for the general MBA program, the class size is about 400 and some change, 440, 420, not entirely sure what the number is, but that's the larger class. And then for the first semester, you're you're organized into subgroups called oceans that are kind of like about maybe 60, 70 people. And they kind of really become like a really close-knit group within the larger 400 and something people in the program, that you take every class together. You have like one elective that you can do the first semester, but you really kind of share the classroom day in, day out, and you have a bunch of different events, and and within the 60 people group, you also have your core team. So it's kind of like a way to create community the first semester, especially for especially it was really I guess it was really important for me because it coming into such a large program with so many new things, it can be an overwhelming place. But the group of 67 people that I was with in day out in the classes, it became like a support group for everybody. So everybody was able to kind of share experiences and trade notes and kind of help each other out in a very meaningful way, just because of the size that we were at and seeing each other so often.
Andres, thank you so much for that. So we'll kind of dive into more specific FGLI questions, or first generation low income questions, to give the students or the prospective students here a little bit more insight into what it's like to be a FLY student. So we'll kind of start off with, as a first generation college graduate, are there any specific scholarships or support programs that they should know of and that you've utilized?
There were definitely like, if I remember, so I've forgotten a little bit because it's been a while now since I graduated. Well, a while, I guess 3 years almost. There were definitely like some smaller funds I remember available for students. I think, for example, like if you're experiencing financial hardship, there were some funds that you could tap into. I think also some for sort of like some of the events, because some of the events are kind of like paid events that like as part of the MBA program that you could like draw support from for that specifically. Yeah, I think I would, yeah, I want to maybe sort of like tag someone else who's been there more recently to tell us about it. But there's definitely been some kind of like some sort of like smaller funds and resources that we've been able to tap into during my time there.
Uh, well, okay, I don't know about the and have used, but piece of it. But one that I didn't use, but I wish I would have used, and it's not a Sloan program, but I know that a lot of people did the Toigo fellowships, especially for people that are kind of like I think it's a little more finance leaning, people with an interest in finance. I didn't do it, but I know a lot of people that did it, and I know that it's a great resource. And I didn't know about it when I started the MBA. Within Sloan, the I think the student groups can actually become a really good resource because the the yeah, I think this is the I'm talking about what Terrell is mentioning in the comments, that some of the activities that we would do with the Hispanic Business Club or with the FLI group. I remember there's some travel opportunities. There's some travel opportunities that student life office or the student groups can kind of like apply for. And in that way, I participated in some of those activities that are off campus, or that I know that that's kind of like a big thing and can be a financial hardship. But I think one thing that I would like to mention though is that it always felt like when there was any kind of need, the program managers and student life office, was always within reach and super approachable. So any kind of um, any kind of question they would always be open to kind of like have like a very holistic and comprehensive answer that would pretty much solve what you're looking for. And so I did reach out to the program manager a few times and was able to kind of get some guidance and find the support that I needed in or the programs that I was looking for.
Yeah. So for me, I did not rely a lot on like financial assistance, or maybe because like what Andrea said, I haven't done much research on that. But I've heard about external funding sources. So similar to Towigo, there's also the Forte Women MBA fund that you can look into. I do know a couple of classmates who actually got a small fellowship out of that. So I believe there are external bodies that you can actually refer to as well. Yeah. And to echo what Andres mentioned, we can always reach out to the student life office and they will offer you avenues to look for funds whenever you need them.
Thank you, Janisha. Our next question here is for students who come from non-traditional or low-income backgrounds, what specific resources or networks at Sloan have been the most impactful in building confidence and access to leadership roles?
I think for me, and I definitely come from a little bit of a like non-traditional background, as in sort of emerging markets, startup, tech space, coming into MBA and wanting to transition into sort of like a big tech product management and kind of leadership. I think I definitely did rely on my sort of colleagues and friends from the Fly Club. So a lot of them, especially the second years, as we came in, you'll always find people who are like interested in the same things that you're interested in. And that's the thing with Sloan. Like you'll always find people who have like made the pivot that you're trying to make or have done something that you're trying to do. And so like what's great about that is you just sort of like if you talk about like what you want, then the people the people and the help somehow finds you. So definitely for me, the Fly Club members have been helpful. For example, for things like interviewing, when I was like applying to Amazon, like applying for these big tech companies, applying for leadership roles. Then in other clubs as well, like other business clubs at Sloan. So those are very helpful. And then also just like other kind of like career focused clubs where there will be a lot of different programs that will help you, like especially not knowing, like you want to go into consulting, you don't know how that works, like what is it that you need to do. You'll have career office that helps you do that, and then you'll have like the consulting club. For me it was like the product management club. I had no idea what like product management cases were and like how to do that, so there was a lot of folks who helped me both from the Fly Club and the product management club and the career office to kind of like get there and like get my internship and get my full-time role down the line. So definitely, I think just like broader Sloan community, I would say, and then your specific career interests and affinity groups are definitely helpful with that, navigating that process.
So I just want to add that because Sloan is so diverse, what I feel socioeconomic status is just one part of it. So what really helped me is taking up some of the leadership classes where you get to understand yourself better, understand your strength, understand the value that you can convey whenever you come to a group. And I think MIT Sloan just has a knack for choosing people. I would say at least 80% of the people who are humble, open-minded, and willing to learn from people from various backgrounds. So I never felt like coming from a, FLI was something that I had to constantly remind myself about. And like what Dragana said, there are avenues to build confidence by taking up leadership positions in clubs, and definitely FLI is not a qualifying factor in that. It's more like what value you want to bring to the table and what you want to learn out of the experience. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with what Denisha and Dragana have said for sure. I think the diverse community and being able to talk to anybody about what you want, and then if you don't know the person across the room, then that person that you just talked to will introduce you, and they'll be able to guide you better into what you're starting to explore if you're actually interested in. I think it just becomes, I think the community, the people that are in the room with you, it's like such an open place that you can ask questions that you might not be able to ask anywhere else. And those answers being so readily available, maybe the person that's sitting next to you, but just didn't know, you just didn't happen to talk to them, but somebody else made that introduction. I think those social connections are extremely valuable in empowering you and trying to making sure that you're getting to the place that you want to be, whether that is something in leadership in a club or talking to the right person at some company that you're interested in recruiting for. And also I think the question is maybe what's on campus and like what's in Sloan. But I think when you're Sloan and you're a student, being able to talk to the alumni, it's a great resource. I think I talked to a lot of alumni just trying to also figure out what is it that I wanted to do and all these different avenues that I never heard of before. And just having those informal conversations with people that are open to talk to you because you're a student was extremely valuable and really helpful for me as somebody that from a non-traditional background, and also first generation college grad and also grad. So I think everybody's being so open and talking and willing to help you. I think it's extremely valuable.
Thank you, everyone. So the next question I'm going to ask is more about the financial trade-offs. Specifically for Fly students, an MBA can be really costly. And so what financial trade-offs did you face during the program, and how did you navigate them without compromising your experience or contributions, or rather ambitions?
I can talk, but I also feel like I always talk first. I don't know. That's fine. Yeah, cool. I think like, yeah, I think that it is for coming from like a first gen low income background. It's almost like when you look at that, like when you're on the outside and you're applying and you're like looking at that price tag and you're figuring out like, how do I even do this, right? It is a serious investment. And that's just something to acknowledge, right? It is a serious. So like, I'll just talk a little bit about like the way I did it, right? So like one thing that I did, even as I was sort of like applying, I was literally putting in the spreadsheet. All right, like what is this investment that I would have to make? Like maybe what's the expected scholarship that I could get, right? Like that could be a range. So you kind of like you apply and then you may get a merit-based scholarship. I got some, but not all of it, of course. Maybe there's some external scholarships. Maybe there's some personal savings, right? And then maybe there's some financing and loans that you're gonna like take out to be able to like make this work for you. So I literally made a spreadsheet with all of this information and then kind of like put, all right, like leaving business school. And this was one of the trade-offs, right? Like leaving business school is like for me to like make sure I can like pay back for this for like this education and everything. Like what do I have to do? And I was like, all right, well, I don't think I can temporarily go back to like, you know, my social impact work that I did in Kenya at this rate. But then again, and so that is a trade-off, right? But then again, I can, you know, like the job that I would be getting in product in the States would definitely, like, according to my spreadsheet, within the next 5 years, like help me get where I want to get, right? So it's a little bit, and I'm not saying like everyone needs to do this kind of like long-term planning, right? But it is a little bit understanding, like, all right, so maybe with this investment, I am going to have certain potential short-term career trade-offs, but also potential like long-term career gains. So I think that's kind of like my personal experience at the moment. I'm having like I was having a short-term potential trade-off, but then kind of a long-term gain of like the experience that I'm getting, and kind of like where I'm on track to like meet some of my other financial goals. And yeah, and I think also during the MBA program, like budgeting is a thing, right? So like there's going to be a lot of things that you want to do. Like there's going to be a lot of like trips and events and things. So some of the trade-offs is like, well, you have to pick and choose, right? If you can't like, you know, afford all of them or pay for all of them, like you pick the ones that you want to do most, you pick the ones that have some like financial assistance that comes with it. You pick, so it is, you can still have like a very good experience and very full experience with some of this sort of like careful budgeting and short and long-term trade-offs that you make and still get to your goals. It's just kind of being aware that it is a big investment and it requires some kind of like, I guess, more careful planning.
Yeah, so for myself, I did take a loan, and very much like what Dragana said, I also did a spreadsheet to measure what's the NPV of the education, right? And I have to say it's kind of hard to quantify, especially in uncertain economic times. But one thing I know for sure is the intrinsic value of the MBA is going to take me further in my career and even my life experiences. So I constantly kept that in mind. And just to add on to like, you know, looking for funds when you are in school, besides like external scholarships, you know, financial aids, there are also ways you can earn money while you're on campus. For instance, doing an internship, you can be a teaching assistant, you can be a research assistant, and those do cover some of your tuition as well. If you can, and if those fit into your schedule, it can be a pretty fulfilling experience when you get to work with like the professors and students at the same time. Yeah, so that's something to consider as well, like the flexibility of getting your studies funded while still having the full-time experience. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll say that maybe my approach wasn't as structured as Dragana's or Denisia's. But I mean, I think that was one of the takeaways from being at Sloan, so that I can actually be more structured about those things now. I think for sure though, it was a mix of different sources that kind of allowed me to do this, and I also definitely saw it as a long-term investment in myself and my growth and my financial goals for the long term. just because with the place that I was before, it was clearly not heading in the direction that I wanted to be in the long term. So I think it was a combination of scholars from Sloan that allowed me to have a little bit of to make the decision to begin with, and also a little bit of loans, but also being a little bit strategic on the types of things that I wanted to do while in Sloan. Like it was like Dragana mentioned, there is a lot of trips, there is a lot of events, there is a lot of these things, but there's not there's things that are definitely that you can participate and see them as kind of like helping you get the full experience. When I guess like maybe like the way that I was strategic about picking the things that I was doing is just having kind of like a well diversified things list of things that I was doing, when you can just kind of you can go to certain events, you can do certain trips, but at least being able to say that I did certain amount of things once, and fully being present, and being able to engage with the people that were there, or with the professionals from outside of Sloan that I was speaking to for a certain event outside of the city or stuff like that. I think I I feel like I was able to get a full experience by just picking from a wide range of different opportunities, instead of repeating them over and over. So, and I think that kind of like that's the perspective that I took more than anything.
Okay, we'll have our last question from me as moderator, and then we'll dive into the Q&A, open Q&A from the audience. So the last question here is, how does Sloan intentionally build a sense of belonging and community among students from different backgrounds?
Mm. I can jump in on this one. I think I don't know if I did a great job earlier about explaining what the oceans are, but I think the oceans was kind of like one of the highlights for me from the beginning, because like it was such an impactful way of building community from the get-go, that you have this team of 60 people where you have an offsite the first week of the year, where you get to meet them and have like you get to know them very personally, and you're kind of encouraged to be vulnerable with them and have kind of meaningful conversations. That I think that was my first aha moment of being like, oh, okay, everybody here is interested in seeing you grow, and that you can actually have very meaningful interactions, and have very you can create kind of very meaningful communities, as long as you're engaging, and you want to build the same community. I think the first touch point of the oceans was like really impactful for me, and then that kind of set the tone for everything else afterwards. Being able to also carry that kind of sense of community and openness, and willingness to share what you know to the people around you, and also being able to remain open and vulnerable, and ask the questions that you want to hear people's experiences of. So that's kind of like what impacted me the most.
So I can speak to the Sloan Fellows program. So the Sloan Fellows program typically has about like 100 to 120 students. So it's a good size where you get to know everyone. And I think Sloan has, the Sloan program office has done a great job in ensuring that every 1 or 2 months there are bonding, events, activities that happen. So for instance, in fall, you have like apple picking because it's apple season. Towards the end of the year, we have like a trip to like, somewhere nearby. So for my year, we did Cape Cod. So depending on what the program office has planned out. And at the same time, I did mention throughout the year as well that there are different committees that were formed within the program itself. So I did mention one about the cultural community committee, where we had a night where, you know, we had different cultures, and an event where we brought food, and, you know, we shared different cultures and traditions. That's just one example. We also have another event where we actually get together every week to share our life stories in a very intimate setting. So that's how we kind of build bond with each other. And it doesn't matter like where you're from, what have you experienced, what kind of experiences you've been through, because you will realize that everyone brings you know, their own unique set of lens and experiences to the table. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for answering these questions. We're going to transition into the live Q&A portion of this session. So I'm just going to, very similarly, I'm going to ask the question, and then our panelists can answer them as they choose. So the first question here is, as a first generation student, I find myself coming across a lot of surprises. What would you recommend I do before starting an MBA program to limit the untold distractions when starting my program?
It's a good question. I think it's difficult, and I say this because I was definitely the person in the MBA program who kind of came in without doing much preparation, and then was in at the same time was interested in everything and wanted to try like all the different kinds of classes, ranging from, you know, like what we talked about before, like I want to do entrepreneurship, but also I'm interested in some of this like enterprise management stuff, and I'm interested in, you know, all kinds of different things that I wanted to try. So there was definitely a lot of like, I don't want to say not necessarily distractions, but just a lot of different interests. What I think does help maybe, and what I would do differently coming in is maybe like thinking ahead every semester. Okay, so what are like my top 3 to 4 kind of goals for this semester? Right. And that could be something like, you know, I want to build like community in this type of way, or I really want to like land this internship, or I really want to learn about this specific area, or like this specific kind of thing that fascinates me, or I want to, you know. So setting some goals is good and helpful. And I think that gives you some direction, because you come into the program and there's a million things that are happening, right? From the classes that you can choose, the people that you can meet, the clubs that you can participate in, the events, there's so much, right? So trying to figure out like how you navigate that, it helps to set some personal goals. But I think it also helps to be a little bit like open-minded, in a sense of like, okay, not just like I'm gonna follow these goals and that's it. Like leave a little bit of space for exploration of like things that may surprise you and that you may find. So like I think that that combination of mostly goals and some openness for new things would have helped me maybe come in a little bit more focused. Yeah.
Just to get through a few more of these questions, how we're going to move forward is I'll ask one of the questions, and then we'll have one of the panelists answer, and then we'll just jump into the next question just so we can get more of the questions going. So this next question here is Olivia, a guest, is asking, can you talk about the specific opportunities that you had to gain exposure to for tech careers and opportunities on campus?
I guess this should be me. I don't know if Andres or yeah, I guess. I think for specifically for tech careers, it's pretty great, honestly. Product Management Club and Technology Club were really helpful. I think also Career Office at Sloan does help. So like meeting with them early, talking about your goals and things you want to do, and then directing you to the right resources, that helps a lot. There's a lot of, I think, alumni and second year students that have already, for example, you know, maybe landed internships or jobs at the places where you want to go. So talking to them helps as well. And there's also just like recruiting events on campus. There at least used to be in 2023, I think probably still now. So there's kind of like these like organized like recruiting events, info sessions, in sort of like one-on-one or interviews or group chats with different alumni. These companies do want to recruit Sloan students, so that definitely does help. So you can just kind of like plug yourself into some of those systems. Just making sure that you do it early on. I think that's like sort of big tech especially comes in pretty early, like first semester and like early second semester. And then some of the more kind of like startup stuff is like throughout the first and second year. So yeah.
Thank you, Jordana. So I'm actually going to mash these next two questions because I think they're very similar. But the MBA involves quite a lot of travel, networking. And so when you think about how to budget or finance, how do you structure your financing plan? And how does this impact or come from, what is it like coming from a low income background, financing these sort of things?
I think kind of like similar to what I was alluding to earlier, that like the budget plan that I did was kind of being a little strategic and knowing from the get-go that I would allocate from the beginning like a set amount for all these trips and like all these events, and kind of like that's my budget. And really I kind of front loaded it because I knew that just kind of coming into the first year, get as many of these experiences in to like meet as many people as possible, and kind of in the second year spending it a little more kind of in the Cambridge area events and that kind of stuff. And I think that's kind of like the approach that I took with the resources that I had at the moment, the loans and scholarship and savings, combination of all the above. And I think it's a relatively common approach, I'd say. I found that a lot of people in my year kind of were feeling the same way that I did, and that there's a lot of things happening, and you want to do all of it, and ends up being that the first year you end up doing as much as you can, and then second year kind of becomes like this fostering relationships that you've found and people that you met over the first year. And I think that's kind of how I handled it, just kind of being a little bit strict on like what my spending would be for the first year, and then setting that budget up front and trying my best to manage that, I guess. But being clear and honest with what you are actually willing to do and take, and what you will be getting out of the events.
Thank you, Andres. This second question, I do want to bounce to Janisha and also one other MBA student. So this question is, if at all, how does the overall MBA or SFMBA experience differ as a FGLI student for those who do not identify as a FGLI student? And does our background affect much when socializing in general? So Janisha, I'll have you start.
So I think this goes back to one of the questions you've asked earlier about building confidence. So I'd like to iterate again that, it's always good to understand the value that you're bringing to the table. It's not always measured in like economic terms. So I think for me, what helped was to start with leadership classes earlier in the program. So for the Sloan Fellows program, you actually do get, I would say, a full term of leadership classes paired with an executive coach. So this is where you can work through some of your self-limiting beliefs about, being, FGLI, and basically seeing the world differently as what you can bring from your unique experiences. And I think the second point about, what Andres actually mentioned again, there are certainly some events where you might feel excluded from just because of the cost of the event, right? Like, for instance, if you're going skiing in Colorado, you might not want to splurge on that trip alone. So that's where you can actually ask yourself, like, do you really want to go on that trip, or can you actually organize somewhere that's nearer, for instance? with a smaller group of friends, you see. So you can always, instead of like following what others are doing, you can always initiate your own events as well. So I would say, but the biggest part for me, again, I think back to what I just mentioned earlier on, is working through the self-limiting beliefs, right? And understanding the value that you're bringing to the table. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Janisha. Would anyone else like to answer this question as an MBA student, full-time?
I can talk a little bit about that. I mean, I think for me, the education aspect of it was kind of like it was tough at times to deal with. That it, if I'm being honest, it did feel at times that there was a lot of people that had all this knowledge and kind of like had all certain kind of like understanding of how industries work or how like certain recruiting practices work, and I came in pretty, I guess, unprepared for that, and it was kind of like tough to me not kind of get into my head and be like, oh, because these are things that people like would normally talk about in a dinner time conversation, and I never had those conversations. But going back to like what I was saying, that everybody else, but everybody is very open about their experiences. So it's kind of acknowledging that these different experiences that everybody has, and some of the leadership classes definitely like help on like building the confidence to ask the right questions, and nobody will ever tell you no in that regard. That everybody's open and will kind of like talk to you and teach you and knowledge share in a way that is honest and humble. But kind of like getting over that hump of like, we're all here to learn, we're all here in the community to support each other, and we all bring different values. I think that was like something that I struggled with at the beginning, but over time kind of got better at acknowledging that we do all bring different values to the table, and that sure, I might not know how different corners of the financial industry work or have evolved over time, but there's other things that I bring to the, and we can talk about those things. And the community itself, I think it's what like helped me get over that.
Thank you, Andres. And so this last question here, I will have open to all of our panelists. And we will be, this is our last question. So the question is, what are some examples of activities organized by the Fly Club, and how does it differ from other clubs, given that many of them seem to have very similar events and activities?
I'll talk quickly about just like in my experience, I think in like, yeah, when we were like 2022, 2023, I think the biggest differentiator of Fly Club events versus like other events that I had, I think were that Fly Club or FGLI, I think now, they're more focused, I think, on building community. I think you will have a lot of like different types of events, for example, during the MBA. So you'll have more like career focused events. You'll have just like fun party stuff that like friends do, which is also like totally fine and totally great to do. But I think the Fly events were more kind of like bringing us all together, kind of acknowledging some of these things that I think both Andres and Janisha were talking about earlier, that we do have different experience, that oftentimes we come in and we are like, what is going on? I did not know what an MBA is before I started thinking about applying for an MBA, right? And some of our, colleagues or some of our like classmates that are also like just really awesome, they knew that they were going to do an MBA like 5 years ago, right? And were fully prepared. And that's awesome to have someone who's had that experience, right? But like, I think bringing us together, acknowledging that like, yeah, we maybe face a particular experience and we all share that experience, and like how can we help each other like navigate through that. That was kind of the cornerstone of a lot of these events that we did, like kind of coming together, maybe going to like a trip in New England somewhere together, or like, having like a Christmas dinner party or a Thanksgiving dinner party because like nobody's traveling outside. of like Boston that year or whatever. So I think that was that. And honestly, many of my close friendships came out of that group too. So that's one big thing. And then really helping you like navigate that MBA experience from that FGLI point of view has been really helpful.
Does anybody else want to share? Andres?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just like I would like to emphasize Dragana's point that like, yeah, I think it became a community where there's like the mutual understanding of a shared background and that it is acknowledged. It did feel like it was a place, I guess, or a safe space in that way that it's easy to acknowledge and have tougher conversations because of a shared experience in a way. And same thing, like from FGLI, I there's friends that I still keep in touch with and like that I kind of became friends with like through the program and like became uh great people to bounce off ideas and just kind of put my experience into a larger perspective of like what's going on around me because it is a lot.